This is a video about dots and ties, symbols that you may have come across before. What they do is they change the duration of the note values that we already have. You may have noticed that we have a limitation with the common note values. Where a note can be either a whole note or a half note, or a half note or a quarter note. And there surely is more variety of rhythms out there that you've heard. So dots and ties can actually help us to get that variety. They can work with this space in between here, something shorter than a whole note but longer than a half note. Dots and ties will help us to do that. So let's start with dots. Dots are actually called augmentation dots. Okay, that's their longer name, because what they do is they take the length of a note and they augment it, they make it longer. So if we take, for example, this half note and add an augmentation dot, let me clean up this notation here. Take a half note and add an augmentation dot. What that does, the augmentation dot adds half of the original note's value to that note. So we started here with a half note, and the dot means make this note an additional half longer, 50% longer than it initially was. So what you can imagine this is half of a half note is a quarter note. So really, a dotted half note equals a half note plus half of its value, which is a quarter note. Okay. So we've taken a note value, and when we add a dot, it's like saying multiply it times 1.5. Okay. Half note times 1.5 equals a dotted half note. All right. So this gives us a length in between the whole note and the half note. It's right in the middle. Okay, so there's one example. So we can do this with any of our standard note values. We did a quarter note, okay, with an augmentation dot. That would be like taking a quarter note and adding half of the value of a quarter note, which is an eighth note, to it. Okay. So again, we can do this with any of the values. We can also, additionally, this is a little bit more advanced, you're going to see it less often, but since we're here, there is also something called a double dot, two augmentation dots, like that. And what that is it takes the original note value plus half of the original note value's duration, and then additionally, this is what the second dot is for, a quarter of the original note's value. So in this case, that would be a 16th note. Okay, so the first dot is half of the value of the original note, and the second dot is a quarter of the value of the original. Okay. So that is a double dot. Now, the tie is the other concept. It's actually really quite similar. Move this out of the way. A tie is another way that we can extend the duration of a note. That's a tie right there. It's a little curved line that connects two note heads. Now, there's an actually very similar notation of something you might have seen before that looks almost exactly like it, and it's called a slur. Okay, this one's a slur, and this one would be a tie. The difference is a tie connects two notes of the exact same pitch. Okay, so you can just imagine they're both on the same line. That's what a tie does. A slur is connecting notes of different pitch. Okay, imagine some situation like this. This one's on a line, that one's on anything else, but this one's on some other space. That'd be a slur. That actually means play the first note to the second note in a very connected way, without any space between them. Whereas a tie, actually you only are hearing one pitch, the first pitch, and its duration is lasting longer than normal. Okay, so a little bit confusing. The symbols are both curved lines. But anyhow, that's a slur. Now the tie has a lot of flexibility. You can imagine that we can actually tie any two note values together and get a really wide variety of rhythms. So let me start with, let's just work with our half notes. We could tie this and this together. Okay, and so what that would mean is a half note plus a quarter note, but you only hear one attack. There'd be an attack of the note here, but if they were separated, usually without the tie, you'd hear two different attacks. The tie says sustain the initial note for the combined length of these two values. Now you might be noticing, wait a minute, isn't this the same as what we just saw? Couldn't we say this is a dotted half note? Yeah. The context will depend on which one we use, and when you learn about meter, that'll start to make a little bit more sense, but it is a little bit of a tough topic. The other thing, though, is ties, much more flexibility than we have with dots. We can have, for example, a half note tied to an eighth note, which would not work with a dot. It wouldn't, even, if we put a dot here, this is wrong. Okay, that's not right. It's less than that. And, a double dot is even more wrong. So we can't really express that particular rhythmic value with dots. It simply is a half note plus an eighth note. That's the best that we can do. But again, the tie is saying strike it once, or sing it once, and then make the duration the combination of the two values. Okay. Now, again, it's difficult to know which one does one use, a dotted quarter or a quarter tied to an eighth. Which one? But don't worry, that's something that it is subtle, but you'll have to understand meter and beats in order to put those into context. All right, that's it. That is dots and ties, and remember, dots are also called augmentation dots.